Okay, people, I can hardly keep up with the lunacy, so let's get to it. For years, since the Russian crisis, we have repeatedly stated that China and the United States will separate, and the warning signals are beginning to glow in neon red. It will be a brave new world. What Beijing is doing signals an impending economic war, and what Washington is saying just reinforces this. But let's start with China. The mainstream media has finally noticed that the Chinese are restricting their most vital import, food. The critical resource for feeding 1.4 billion people is shifting from Western suppliers to China's partners. And we can thank Trump's return for that, as Chinese importers scramble all the way to Bolivia and Kenya to replace their Western suppliers. What is more important than oil and gas and more critical than AI chips is the food we consume. And, as we saw with the Arab Spring in 2010, there is only so much food price inflation before absolute catastrophe ensues. In China, nothing is more vital than domestic stability. And if Trump eventually pushes the G7 to curtail food supplies to China and the reliance persists, Beijing will be in tremendous difficulty. However, they have planned ahead of time, and this tremendous change in demand is about to occur. They are the world's largest importer of food, with total imports estimated at $140 billion. So this tsunami of demand will migrate from the G7 to China's economic friends, i.e., the BRICS and their partners, and it will be Boomtown Charlie for them. This is bad news for farmers in the West, including the United States and the European Union, who will face higher input prices. Trump now wants John Deere to manufacture the equipment in U.S. plants. The EU is also experiencing a severe energy issue, and if China continues to pull the plug, the farming business may be crushed and, by all accounts, decline since the largest customer is walking away, affecting basic demand and supply here. Let's take agriculture as an example. Grain and wheat imports are plummeting, while Western suppliers are seeing negative growth of minus 12.3%. When demand falls, U.S. farmers have a difficult decision: either discard their food or sell it at a discount. And if this continues, they will have to close the farms. But look where China is buying more from. Imports from Latin America are skyrocketing. Asia, Russia, and Africa are providing more food to the Chinese market. Simply put, the BRICS nations are beginning to profit from what the G7 is losing. The West will now be obliged to trade more amongst itself since they must purchase their own oil, gas, and food, although at substantially higher rates. China no longer wants to decouple. Instead, it is attempting to globalize with the rest of the globe. But like the Russian oil sanctions, the threat from the West is driving the Chinese economy away. Now, the U.S. is pressuring TSMC and Samsung to prohibit semiconductor shipments to China, attempting to choke off Chinese technology. Oh, but it gets worse here, Biden. He's burning everything around him before leaving. The United States has prohibited imports from 37 new Chinese enterprises, citing forced labor, so industries such as solar manufacturers are unable to deal with the U.S. Billions of dollars in commerce will be affected. Now, you might claim that this is the Biden administration going wild in the days leading up to the new government, but is that true? Could this just be a continuation of the containment policy? Because something tells me that, at least in China, the deep state is in charge, and even Trump may not be able to reverse the present trend. Regardless, we know China has been accumulating tons of food for decades, hoarding anything and everything that can be preserved just in case. More than 200 million metric tons of maize, 150 million tons of wheat, another 150 million metric tons of rice, and soybeans. This is an existential threat that might devastate the Chinese economy. Many commentators now claim that China is stockpiling for conflict, but this is just prudent. Consider the amount of mayhem if more than 1 billion people do not have adequate food. Now, the transition away from G7 farmers is substantial. In 2018, Trump had to urgently restore Chinese penalties on U.S. food imports, which was a huge event at the time. However, this scenario will change, and China may use it as a significant negotiation chip. So, if Beijing plays that hand, the upcoming U.S. taxes on Chinese imports may not exceed 60%. But if they don't, this move will result in significant winners and losers. China's meat imports provide insight into the future. Now sit back and reflect. Where is China establishing its supply chains? Where are they busily developing ports? And that is South America. Import licenses from non-Western nations are increasing, with Brazil, Argentina, and Bolivia gaining the most from this shift in demand. It makes perfect logic because it's theoretically safer to buy food from Latin America. You assist in creating the ports so that the supply chain, from farmers to ships, is safe. Trump's trade war will simply exacerbate the situation, putting significant pressure on U.S. agriculture. It also has a negative impact on farmers' revenue since they are unable to increase production. While it is true that China's population is declining overall, we must look carefully at the underlying drivers of food consumption, which will be the middle class. There are a lot of people being lifted out of poverty. Now, by 2030, food consumption is expected to skyrocket. 80 million individuals will be pulled out of poverty and into the middle class, accounting for roughly 1/4 of the total U.S. population. China does not produce enough food. Thus, they will have to import grains and meat. This is one market that Beijing may use as a weapon in the upcoming trade conflicts. Now they need to comprehend the playbook. The United States has the strongest dollar and the largest consumer market, while Chinese demand for food can have a significant impact on the U.S. economy. So things are devolving into a tie-for-tat tactic. I am sure Trump is aware that food is a weak place in the economy. If this collapses, there will be a daily domino effect. It might begin with American agriculture, but the misery will reach all the way to Walmart via greater inflation. This is the number of U.S. jobs supported by American exports to China. The top one commodity is oilseeds and grain, with about 18 billion. Chinese demand is sustaining around 180,000 jobs. Meat exports rank third, supporting more than 30,000 jobs. And in sixth place, China's crop demand supports almost 30 grand employment. So Beijing has some bargaining power here. It will be perilous for Trump to put the pedal to the metal. China will most likely face a tariff of 30 or 40%. However, a 60% tariff is quite unlikely, and that will merely welcome Armageddon. China will be obliged to retaliate, and they will impose severe restrictions on food imports. The issue at hand is not limited to occupations in the United States. It's more about farms closing down, because if that happens, the prices of all foods would rise. The last thing we need is rising food prices. We can see how unstable food inflation has become. Now, what occurred from 2020 to 2023? The Federal Reserve printed large amounts of money to preserve the economy. However, due to the lockdown, the supply of supplies decreased. So you have more money chasing fewer things, which leads to increased inflation. This is pretty simple to grasp. This is why the CPI for food has nearly reached 10%. But have we actually learned from our mistakes? Because if the United States provokes China into a trade war, Beijing may just pull the rug out from under them. Demand might plummet, resulting in another supply chain shock. So 2025 might be a really messy year. And these are simply Chinese moves. The U.S.'s future plans likewise portend dread and misery. And it comes from Marco Rubio, Trump's cabinet's most vocal China hawk, and he's infatuated with Beijing. He even published a 58-page paper called The World China Made. It's remarkable and demonstrates how certain sectors of Washington are already prepared for the task ahead. The charts shown here are actually pretty nice. This in particular demonstrates that China has already surpassed the United States in high-value exports. In 2022, China's stake increased from 8% to 13%, while U.S. exports have been flat for decades. The research is essential because it provides insight into the Trump administration's psychology. When the U.S. claims it wants to reorganize production and bring manufacturing back, they mean it. And based on this, we should anticipate the United States to continue to try to control China's economy. Tariffs may be the solution. Perhaps it involves Greenland and Canada, but something will happen because China is Rubio's worst fear and nightmare, a diplomatic and commercial competitor. Furthermore, as they evolve, they pose a military danger to the country, and they are interested in the region. They definitely want to exploit minerals and have mineral rights. But they also seek leverage. They seek control of countries so that they may vote with them in international forums. Finally, they may theoretically Pishonize themselves on a rotating or permanent basis all throughout the world, militarily and otherwise. In essence, they would love nothing more than to encircle the United States and establish themselves in each of the nations, for example, in which you have all been selected to serve, as well as throughout the area. But let's finish the transaction here. Let's put the last nail in the economic coffin. We don't have to search far in this scenario. Marco Rubio has just made it very plain. According to him, China stole its way to power by using the post-war global order against the United States. It has become a weapon used against us. And this might be his official address to Congress. I'm not sure about you, but this seems like a really risky assertion. For one, both countries profited from the post-war order. U.S. corporations used inexpensive Chinese labor. Let us not forget about that. They earned trillions of dollars in the process. So hearing something like this is, to put it mildly, odd. However, as previously said, it provides a view inside the corridors of power. This will undoubtedly have far-reaching consequences. China will be on high alert. And don't be shocked if things become serious in 2025. China might release even more economic stimulus and tighten its own sanctions on the United States. It's ridiculous, but there's no reverse gear on either side now. We're still on the sanctions escalator. But tell me what you think. Will China divorce farther from the United States? And what is Marco Rubio doing here? Please let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to like and subscribe as we navigate these tumultuous times.